Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a new, very important episode with MarkTech. Please forgive me for my audio quality being slightly worse. I unfortunately don't have my Blue Yeti microphone with me. But I really needed to make this video. It's a huge one. It's kind of a catastrophe in the Apple world. And as you might have seen from my thumbnail, as you can see on the screen right now, and I'm sure as you have seen from numerous stories across the tech media world, Apple has to currently halt the sales of Apple Watch Series 9 and Apple Watch Ultra 2 in the United States. Obviously, the Series 9 and Ultra 2 being their main flagships of this year, and the United States being their most important native market. So, this has huge implications, and throughout this video, I want to get into how this could have happened, what it means for you in the near future, especially if you want one of those watches and unfortunately will soon not be able to get one, and what it means for the, let's say, medium term future and what could happen to basically solve this issue. So let's get into this. But before we fully get into it, I would like to ask you to do the YouTube jazz, as we call it around here. Please subscribe, like, share, and if you want to support this channel directly, you can find my Patreon link in the description of this channel, as you can my links for my Twitter and Threads accounts, which obviously are useful if you want to communicate with me more directly. Obviously, all help and support is greatly appreciated. Let's start by talking about what exactly happened here and how we got to this crazy situation. Well, at first, let me make clear this is only, if you want to put it this way, a United States issue. So if you are a customer like me in Europe, you are not affected by this, and of course the rest of the world, except for the United States, which is a big deal for Apple, obviously, is not affected. So this is primarily to my 0.5% viewership that comes from the United States, maybe a little higher with the relevancy of this video. This also only affects the Apple Watch Series 9 and Ultra 2 because those devices have blood oxygen sensors. Now you might wonder, well, blood oxygen sensors, well, they aren't new with the Apple Watch Series 9 and Ultra 2, and you would be right. They have been in premium Apple Watches since the Series 6. However, Apple has had a long-standing patent lawsuit with another companies, and we'll get to that. And now this lawsuit has been resolved with a very negative consequence for Apple. Now, the only other Apple Watch that Apple has in the lineup is the Apple Watch SE. Thankfully, the Apple Watch Series 3 is not in the lineup. But the Apple Watch SE, because it lacks that current blood oxygen sensor, is not affected by this sales ban. More importantly, also, if you obviously want to do some planning and if you want to maybe get an Apple Watch Series 9 Ultra 2 as soon as possible while you still can, keep in mind that this will come into effect on December 21st. So Apple basically is giving us a couple of days in advance, and in-store inventory will no longer be available from Apple retail locations after December 24th. So this will be the online sales ban, and this will be the on-location sales ban. So get one as soon as you can if you actually want one. Obviously, with the Series 9 and the Ultra 2, we can argue back and forth if it might make more sense to buy an already used or heavily discounted older generation model. But for example, I am an Ultra 2 user. I'm very happy with it. And if you want to be one too, and you are in the United States, you should get active about it, basically. Now, this comes from the ITC. The ITC obviously being the government agency in the United States that deals with patent disputes. And in this case, as I mentioned, this is a long-standing lawsuit between Apple and the medical technological company Masimo, which has claimed that the Apple Watch blood oxygen sensor is basically infringing on their patents, and this has now finally come to fruition, and obviously in a very, very bad way for Apple. So this is a ruling that was announced in October, but apparently we didn't know about it, or I missed it somehow. Well, but this then started what is called a 60-day presidential review period, which will be running out basically by the time that a sales ban will be enacted. So President Joe Biden can still basically allow Apple to keep selling the Apple Watch Series 9 and Ultra 2. He has time for that until December 25th. This is fascinating to me. I've heard from multiple people that basically the patent situation in the United States and how patent disputes are solved is kind of ridiculous, and that companies that have no relevant technology out there by themselves can still create super broad patents and then basically become forever patent trolls against companies that actually do innovation and inventions. Now, I am neither a legal expert here, nor am I a technological expert, but this seems to be most likely what is currently happening, which is obviously sad for not just for people in the Apple community who want a watch like this, but I think people just in the tech community in general, because even if some people might not like Apple, I think it's pretty obvious that Apple contributes more to the relevant technological landscape than a company like Massimo. I highly encourage you to do some read-ups on them yourself. It's safe to say that their resume is not important and influential in any way, shape, or form. Now, I guess you could say there's some silver lining in that gray cloud here, and that is that if you have an Apple Watch Series 6 or newer, so one of the Apple Watches that have a blood oxygen sensor, those devices don't seem to be impacted in any way. Now, there are sometimes obviously patents that will force a company through software releases and stuff like that to disable certain functionality. At least for now, this does not seem to be the case. However, I will get to the potential of Apple potentially disabling the oxygen sensor to deal with the patent as a whole. But for now, some other good stuff, if you want to consider it this way, is that service, repair, or warranty periods will be respected for all units sold prior to December 25th. So at least there is some good stuff here. If you are already an owner of one of those Apple Watches, you will not be at least severely hurt by this decision. Now, Apple has made a clear statement to 9to5Mac, and I would like to read it to you right now because I think it summarizes the issue pretty well. A presidential review period is in progress regarding an order from the US International Trade Commission on a technical intellectual property dispute pertaining to Apple Watch devices containing the blood oxygen feature. While the review period will not end until December 25th, Apple is preemptively taking steps to comply should the ruling stand. This includes pausing sales of the Apple Watch Series 9 and Ultra 2 from Apple.com starting December 21st and from Apple retail locations after December 24th. Apple's teams work tirelessly to create products and services that empower users with industry-leading health, wellness, and safety features. Apple strongly disagrees with the order and is pursuing a range of legal and technical options to ensure that Apple Watch is available to customers. Should the order stand, Apple will continue to take all measures to return Apple Watch Series 9 and Apple Watch Ultra 2 to customers in the United States as soon as possible. I will obviously get to how they could return those Apple Watches to the market a little bit later on. The next point here is Apple and Massimo's history. If I'm even pronouncing this correctly, this has been going on for a couple of years, basically since around like 2020. To be more precise, since June 2021. This is when the ITC basically was involved by Massimo, and now the ruling has been issued in October, and now we're dealing with the consequences. As I've said before, I encourage you to actually look into Massimo and how they're definitely a patent troll, as they had accused Apple of 103 instances of patent infringement across 5 different patents, but then the ITC basically found that Apple infringed on only 2 patents, covering 5 different instances of patent infringement, so less than 1/20th of what they accused Apple of, and all of that was related to the pulse oximeter feature, which is obviously the Apple Watch blood oxygen feature. This is, to be honest, this is kind of bad in my opinion, because I don't like when patent trolls get their day in court and actually win. I do like when patent disputes are settled in a reasonable way. I don't know if like Massimo will like offer Apple a very like relevant, very like generous licensing agreement. Maybe they will go all crazy and ask for something completely unreasonable. I don't know. I think obviously Apple is most likely trying to deal with Massimo behind the scenes right now. I'm also pretty sure that Apple has enacted every single like lobbyist that they have in Washington to lobby the Biden administration to enact basically such a veto in the ITC decision. However, now this is a statement by 9to5Mac, but it mostly lines up with what I have seen online from other sources, and that is that the government most likely will not get involved in this, because if it comes to something huge like the iPhone, something basically system relevant like the iPhone, then yes, the government will intervene, as did Barack Obama in 2013 in line with Apple's patent disputes with Samsung. However, when it comes to the Apple Watch, that product is obviously far less important. There still would be at least one Apple Watch, even if it's not a high-end model, on the market, and I think the government would be pretty spot on if they believed that Apple was capable of solving this problem without their help. Now, I personally would like it, because I think that, as I said, I don't like to see patent trolls win, and this is my opinion of Massimo. I do like when patents are respected, when companies have like decent patent sharing agreements with each other. I don't know how realistic it was for Apple to like deal with Massimo prior to this announcement, but at least they now have to find some kind of way. Now, I might say that the government will most likely not be involved. However, as I also said, Apple is most likely getting lobbyists involved, and they will be talking about the strong financial impact of their wearable business. That also obviously includes the impact on their suppliers and, of course, their distributors throughout the United States and even their own stores. This also goes to the issue of health benefits that are provided by the Apple Watch hardware, and a lot of long-running Apple Watch-based medical studies, as Apple does them with big institutions like Stanford. So Apple could maybe get the government to veto it, and those are most likely the more relevant points to be made. But as I said before, I am no legal expert here, nor do I have insight into Joe Biden's head. However, if I can make a small appeal, Joe, hey, I actually like you pretty much. I think you've been a way better president than I hoped you would be. So please do this. So what are the potential remedies that Apple could enact for this issue? And don't get me wrong, this absolutely is a big issue. Well, short of obviously Biden enacting that veto that we've discussed, or Apple winning that appeals court case, or Apple eventually finding some kind of settlement decision with Massimo, because if they don't win those prior conditions, this would be a must, because you should keep in mind that the Massimo patents are active until 2028. So in this case, Apple really has no big alternative to working with them at some point. But there are some small alternatives here. Now, one is a pretty drastic one, and one is a pretty smart one. Now, as I've said before, I am not an expert on US patent legal issues, but those are the issues or solutions, I should say, that come to my mind. First would be a pretty drastic one, which would be to redesign the Apple Watch Series 9 and Ultra 2 and take out that blood oxygen sensor entirely. Now, that would cost some R&D, but ultimately it would also bring down cost of the actual production a little bit, and it would eliminate any kind of patent disputes with that company. Apple just would have to come forth to their customers and say, especially in the US, like, yeah, there's no blood oxygen sensor anymore, which would be quite unfortunate. And as I said, this would also negatively impact the Apple Watch ability to provide relevant health data and to be useful in multiple medical studies. There is another solution though, and in my opinion, that one is pretty likely to be an interim solution, and that is a software patch that would disable the blood oxygen feature and basically make the piece of hardware that is shipped with it completely relevant. Because obviously, as I've said before, not an expert on US patent law, but in my opinion, from what I've understood about patent law across the world, whenever I did some research regarding Apple or Samsung, if you basically don't use something, then you cannot really be sued for it. And obviously with a software patch, and as all of Apple's devices, the Apple Watch is heavily modifiable by Apple. Apple could take out the blood oxygen sensor out of the equation, and if there is ever a settlement, they could re-enable it, right? This would be obviously much more beneficial than taking it out entirely and then having models out there that are completely devoid of that kind of functionality. Now, those are the solutions that come to my mind. Please let me know if you can think of anything else. And of course, those solutions would be happening more in the medium to long-term future, while our short-term solutions is basically a veto from Biden. Now, as I've said before, I do not want to really get into the history of Massimus patent trolling because, quite honestly, I just don't want to give them the oxygen. As I've said before, if you want to read up more on this, you can actually go through the most recent 95Mac article on this thing, and then you can find more about their lawsuit that started in 2020, which is a district court case. It's been moving quite slowly, and then there has been an interim decision there where 7 out of 8 jurors sided with Apple, but then eventually, because obviously there has to be a unanimous decision between the jurors, it was declared a mistrial, was restarted. It was basically a complete shit show. So I was actually quite surprised, given this history, that the ITC ended up siding with Massimo, but maybe they understand something I don't. I will try to do some research in the next couple of days and weeks on this issue to find out if maybe Massimo has a better case than I thought they did. But this is where we stand right now. Obviously, this sucks, right? And the impact will be quite noticeable in the United States unless people just run out and buy out every single Series 9 or Ultra 2. This means that Apple will have to find some storage for those Apple Watches. It will impact their financial quarter, and it will just be a hit to their reputation. And of course, for us as customers, now I am personally not affected as somebody in the European Union, and from what I understand, there's very little to no chance of any kind of Massimo lawsuit ever reaching other markets. But obviously the US is a huge market, and for people who maybe like held out on an Apple Watch purchase because they wanted to buy it for a loved one for like the holidays, and you weren't quite like running out to get one, maybe you should consider doing so. In the long term, if this ban is actually enacted and stays in effect for quite a long time, even if it's months, right? Because for a product cycle of an Apple Watch, that's quite a long time. I assume that like there will be some price gouging by resellers for the Apple Watch. It's hard to prevent that. You know how that happened with like the consoles and basically everything else during the pandemic when we had shortages. So I really, really would like for that to happen, but I have to warn you. And with that warning, I would also encourage you, if you actually want one of those Apple Watches, to just get them and own them, because obviously they're quite good investments in the long term. They hold out for they're very durable, they're pretty. We might be getting some kind of small redesign next year. I will get to other Mark Gurman leaks in future videos, but I don't think that anything will come out that will instantly make those Apple Watches completely superfluous. And it's also good to buy them right now at their current price, because obviously if price gouging will be happening later on, that will change the equation. Also, if you buy them right now, there is a chance that even if Apple later puts out a firmware patch that disables the blood oxygen sensor, maybe you could try staying on an older Apple Watch OS release that would allow you to still keep that functionality. Now, a lot of what I have said is speculation and half-informed rambling about a US patent law, but I don't think I'm going too far out of my line here, basically, by saying this sucks. It sucks how it has all happened. It sucks that a patent troll won such a major thing. Like, Apple wasn't even ordered to pay them a cent or two per Apple Watch. Apple sales have been completely banned. I would be saying this about any company if Massimo had won a lawsuit against somebody like Samsung. Believe you me, I would be sitting right here, right now. Well, maybe not right now. I would probably not be making an emergency video. That is absolutely true. But I would be speaking out against it, most possibly on Twitter or on Threads, where you can also find me, as I've joined it 2 days ago. So this is quite crazy, and I would like to keep you updated. I would like to do maybe some live streams where this will obviously be a major issue. This channel has hit 70,000 subscribers, and I'm incredibly grateful for it. I will not be quite as active during the holidays for understandable reasons, I think. And throughout it all, I would still like to communicate with you. This is why I said, please subscribe, like, share, comment, follow me on Twitter or Threads, and if you want to support this channel directly, you can find the Patreon link in the description. All your help and all your engagement is very much appreciated. So please take care. Please make sure that you deal with your Apple Watch purchase needs accordingly, with however this ban impacts you or not, as I know most of my audience is not from the United States, but for those who are, please consider this very important information, and hopefully we'll get some solution for it sooner than later. Thank you again so much. See you next time. This is Mark Tech, tuning out.